Recording in progress.
Good afternoon and welcome to the meeting of the CCTA Planning Committee meeting. It is now 1:30 p.m. I'm calling the meeting to order. Could you please give your attention to this short video?
This meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar to allow for public participation and comments. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority does not condone hate speech in any form. We continually strive to make life better for all members of our community and create an atmosphere where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak does so with civility, respect, and kindness for others. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organizations, but providing such information is voluntary. Citizens participating in person wishing to speak should submit a public speaker card to the clerk. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice on the meeting agenda will be provided to the members. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand in Zoom or submit a public speaker card, and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you. And Jackie, can we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Carlson?
Here.
Commissioner Meadows?
Here.
Commissioner Perkins? Vice Chair Haskew?
Here.
Chair Kelly?
Here.
All commissioners present except for Commissioner Perkins absent.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is public comment. I don't see any speakers here in the room from the public. Jackie, do we have any written or remote public comments?
No written or remote comments.
Okay, so that concludes public comment. So our next item is the consent calendar. Do any of the commissioners wish to pull an item? And are there any comments on the consent calendar? No? Okay, and no one's in the audience. Jackie, are there any written or remote public comments for the consent calendar?
No written and no public comments. I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, so bringing it back to the committee, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Carlson, seconded by Meadows. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Carlson?
Aye.
Commissioner Meadows?
Aye.
Commissioner Perkins? Vice Chair Haskew?
Aye.
Chair Kelly?
Aye.
Okay, all commissioners, motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Perkins absent.
Okay, so now we're moving on to regular agenda items, and the first item is approval of the proposed Planning Department work plan for fiscal year 24-25, presented by John Huang. John?
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, Commissioners. John Huang, Director of Planning. For this item, again, we're seeking your approval to propose and this board's approval to approve the Planning Department's work plan for fiscal year 24-25. So you also receive a handout that's accompanying the staff report. It really expands on the description of these projects that's listed here. So first and foremost, I want to acknowledge that the planning team here, staff, besides myself, my partners in crime are Matt Kelly, Senior Planner, and also Colin Clark, who leads our active transportation work here. So I'm not going to go through the list because I know you all can read this probably better than I can sit here and read it for you. But I want to kind of highlight the projects and just kind of the background. All these projects that are listed here are funded, like 99% of the projects are funded, with the exception of the last one, the evacuation plan where we're kind of waiting for results from the grant application. All these projects were included in the CMA budget back in April. Again, the purpose of pulling this out and kind of highlighting these is just to kind of give you a heads up of what we will be bringing to this committee and the board in the upcoming year. As you know, with the funding project, so it's really funded either by grant funding, Measure J, or OBAC 3 federal funds. Look at the list. Of course, the biggest part of what we're going to be doing this next year is the countywide transportation plan. I think this is probably the biggest effort that's very important to the agency, and we've dedicated a lot of effort and staff time up to date already. As you know, we've kind of worked on the action plans the last couple of years with the RTPCs, and now we're really ready to jumpstart the whole CTP process. And there's going to be a lot of outreach and reach to all the cities and of course the stakeholders. The other part of the other projects listed on here really aligns us to either prioritize projects, getting projects ready in the queue to pursue future fundings when they come up, and then also, if you notice, a lot of these are countywide efforts. So that means that it really serves not only CCTA, but the member agencies, the cities, the counties, the county, and the towns. So we do this on a countywide level effort to, again, align the cities in positions so the cities and the county can pursue their own projects, their own funding source when the opportunity do come up. Some of these programs and projects are delegated to CCTA from MTC for planning and programming functions that we receive funding for, and also these projects are really what our core focus on. We do other things. The planning department work with our other teams here in the CCTA. We do look at the other activities regarding the congestion management agency functions, where we work with the cities a lot of effort in monitoring and administering state and federal funding programs, the TIP money, and also working with your cities and agencies on just making sure that projects are delivered within time and within budget, on time within budget. And also, we, CCTA staff, are the representative for the Bay Area County, working with the MTC, representing the cities and agencies, and on not only transportation but housing issues too. So with that, I'm going to open up to questions. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Yes, Ken?
Thanks, John. Okay, I can't keep track of everything we're doing because you guys work so hard and doing so many different things. So are some of these or multi-year projects? Because what I'm looking at is this is a really heavy lift when you look at countywide on all these programs. And I know we want to do them all, but I also don't want to fall short on our expectations, right? So is this really a manageable list?
That's a great question. Actually, I failed to mention at the beginning. So this list is really comprised of ongoing projects, projects that we're planning to start, and projects that we're going to be completing. So it would not be on this list if we didn't think we were going to work on this.
Okay. So could I ask a favor then?
Yes.
And I'm not going to say I'm new here because I shouldn't say that anymore after a year and a half. But maybe just for me personally, just real quick, go through the list.
Okay.
And email me just the list with, when we initiated the project, so that I know, how long we've been doing what.
Oh,
just
definitely.
get a better handle on keeping track of things.
Okay, thank you. And actually, that's a good point, Commissioner. I actually thought about putting like a matrix together, kind of expanding on, the more of a time frame and the cost associated with. But I can, if you give me the opportunity now, I can kind of
Yeah,
go through
it just a simple initiated in, January of 23, initiated
Okay.
in March of 20, whatever.
Yeah, maybe John, maybe just spend a few minutes and maybe describe which of those tasks are what we'll call special projects and which ones are like ongoing work that we do every single year all the time. Like for example, like the growth management checklist, like that,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
do that all the time,
Yeah,
right?
the
So,
growth
like,
management, I get, you know,
yeah,
that's,
but there's other stuff in here that we also do on a routine basis.
okay, so yeah,
maybe-
perpetual
Maybe,
as-
maybe kind of talk a little about what's special and what's routine.
Oh, certainly, yeah, I can do that. Again, actually, that's a great suggestion. So number one, countywide transformation plan. We've been working on this, like on projects leading to this over the past couple of years, as I mentioned with the RTPCs, and now we're focusing on our own CCTA effort, which is the CTP in itself, and it's going to lead to the transportation expenditure plan down the road. Our time frame is to really jumpstart it or reset it this month. We brought a consultant on board, and it will take us through 2025, the end of 2025, to get a draft plan together, and then we have to do an environmental impact report associated with this project also. So all that is going to be happening by the end of 25, with the 26 having a final adopted plan ready. The CBTP, which is the countywide community-based transformation plan, this is something that we're looking at doing this on a countywide basis. In the previous years, we would receive money from MTC, and we focused on certain communities within the county. So maybe Cedar Martinez, Cedar Pittsburgh, unincorporated county areas, to do multiple multiple CBTPs. This time around, we're actually looking at it on a countywide basis. So we, instead of doing multiple projects, we're going to do one countywide project, and it's still going to impact those EPCs area, but there's more. We felt that a countywide approach would be more efficient, provide more collaborations, and then make it more useful for the agencies and CCTA in general. Activity-based modeling. This is something that we're switching over to. Matt can speak more to this, but I know enough to be dangerous. The modeling, transportation modeling, is really the crux of what we do here as far as projecting travel demand. Up to this time, we've been using a model that's origin destination based. So it's either originating within the county or outside the county, ending within the county, or originating outside the county and inside the county. So there's different scenarios there. Now we're moving away from that and actually going to activities based, which is looking at not only the end points but the middle points. To when we leave our house, do we stop by the donut shop? Do we stop by the gym? Do we stop by the daycare center, the schools, dropping off our kids, and so forth? So that's the activities-based component of it. And then this activity-based aligns with what MTC's modeling has been already doing for many years. The State Route 4 visioning plan, now that's something we're wrapping up. So we've been working on this for about a year and a half now. And we were looking to wrap up within the next few months. And this focuses on State Route 4. Mainly, it really focuses on all the West County, the East County, but a lot of the projects actually comes up from the East County side, starting with 680 East. And what we're doing with this is trying to identify projects, programs, package these programs and projects together that addresses different modes, and prioritize these projects. You notice that there's it's called a Corridor System Management Plan, CSMP. So the CSMP is really a designation that this planning process meets the Caltrans definition of the CSMP, and that really enables us to be eligible for state funding when they come up. The Countywide Comprehensive Transportation Safety Action Plan, that's a mouthful, and I give Colin a hard time about this. So this is another name for this project is the Local Road Safety Plan. Again, we're approaching this on a countywide basis, and it's really looking at safety for all the different pedestrian and bicycling modes, and looking at implementing our Vision Zero and Safe Streets for All. And really, what comes out of this are really to help the agencies, the cities, the town and counties, again, our member agencies, in identifying projects to pursue future funding. So future funding includes the SS4A, Safe Streets for All program, which CCTA actually was to benefit from that, working with the cities. So having a project list going through this whole process really helps all the agencies pursue funding. A growth management plan program, Matt Kelly provided the committee what it essentially is. It's like making sure that the cities comply with our requirements for return to source money. The data dashboard mapping artificial intelligence is something that we started working at, the data, how to present data, how to portray data in a way that can help anybody and everybody, for staff, for us to help us to make more informed decisions, for your city staff to analyze and look at congestion and safety issues throughout the major corridors. We have identified all the roadways, the freeways now, but we're working on always enhancing this. The next step we're doing is adding arterials now. So they're adding the arterials. The major arterials will help the local jurisdictions. And then we're also adding an artificial intelligence component to this, which is kind of fun, trying to, excuse me, query the information in a layman's term by just typing in questions and so forth, and having the information spit out to us. So we've been working on that for a couple of years. We're at the stage now that it's actually public facing and it's available to look at. And actually this month, I'll be going around to the different RTBCs and kind of walking through everybody on how it functions and how it works. The next one is the countywide broadband strategic plan. This is something that we were fortunate enough to receive funding from the CPUC, and it really allows us to, again, work on a countywide basis and reach out to the county, the unincorporated county, who we were aware that also applied, and I myself have been in touch with your staff over there, Commissioner Carlson. So it gives us an opportunity to work on investigating and how broadband fiber optics is really laid out and planned for this county. When I came here back in 2020, there really wasn't anything countywide. I know some of the cities were looking at this on a city level, but I think for the future of CCCA's endeavor of autonomous vehicles and all this technology that we want to do, communication is a really big backbone that we need. And this grant really focuses on underserved and unserved communities, but it gives us the opportunity to kind of tie our Smart Signals project in to it also. And all of this really sets the stage for future funding that's going to come down through the feds and the state for implementation and construction of fiber optics. That project's been going on since we started that last September, and we're anticipating to finish it early next year. The VMT mitigation study, as you know, we completed the phase 1 study, which identifies some of the options for the VMT, for how to offset VMT as far as programs and projects is concerned. We kind of put that on hibernation for a year, but this next year, we're looking at doing a phase 2. I think a lot of the materials that was presented needed more vetting, needed more outreach and education. So our idea on this phase is really to go out into the stakeholders, engage them, kind of introduce them to what the concept is, what we're trying to achieve, and to get buy-in and consensus. Corridor planning is a new idea recently that we thought about, let's look at these certain corridors. We have 4 sub-regions, and we have major corridors that cuts through multiple cities. Outside Pleasant Hill Road, for example, it crosses multiple jurisdictions. It has different geometries through these jurisdictions. How can we look at improving efficiency, mobility, and modality through this corridor, working with the multiple agencies? Everybody, it doesn't end at the city limit. It goes through multiple jurisdictions. So this is what we want to do, and we're going to be selecting one for each sub-region, and trying to do a more in-depth, delve-in study on how we can improve these corridors. The data management plan actually serves 2 purposes. It kind of ties in a little bit with the data dashboard, but it's really, the first purpose is internally, CCTA. We generate so many reports, so many studies, so many findings that, it sits in like a virtual library. How can we access that? How can we use that to make more informed decisions? So the data management plan really to help us internally kind of organize our information and help us to do more, improve our how we analyze information and make better decisions. The other part of it is that once we establish this internally, we want to provide this on a countywide basis, working with the cities and the towns and the county to see what data we collect. A lot of data besides just the documentation, but the data itself, level of service data, turning movement data. How can we combine those, and provide that information to the agencies? And that's to be the second step of it. Then this is a new plan that we're looking at working this year, and there's going to be more descriptive once we get more description once we get into it itself. The bicycle parking electric charging station study is addressing the proliferation and the influx of more electric bicycling. I know our own staff has an electric bike, and sometimes it's hard to find parking for these bikes, unlike the regular the standard bicycle. And then also looking at charging station. And again, this is not CCTA. This is really for this, working with the cities and the towns to come up with solutions. The next one is the CMP. This is something we do every year, every other year. It seems like every year, but it's every other year, every odd year. But this is really measuring the level of service. We still do measure level of service as part of this, and the CMP network is comprised of roadways, mainly freeways, and also intersections that has been established back in the 90s, back when the CMA has was established. And this is part of state statute that we need to do this. And it's just monitoring. We look at it compared to year after year. So like this project, the result of this project, we actually upload it to the data dashboard. So you can actually see every other year how it changes and how, what changes and what stays the same. The next one, the CBP update, the document was actually completed back in 2018. We did minor updates in 2021 to 2022. We continue to revisit this document because projects do change, priorities do change, and we want to make sure that we've addressed all the and technology changes. So we want to make sure that we address all the differences and update the document as necessary. Okay, so the next one, I'm at number 16 here, is the countywide micromobility policy regulation standardization. Again, besides the electric bikes, there's a lot of micromobility. There's a lot of the scooters and other contraptions out there, other modes out there that's on our streets right now. When I came on board, like in 2020, I think CCT had just completed a micromobility. We did a whole study on micromobility. Unfortunately, with the pandemic and so forth, the whole effort kind of got shelved for a few years, and we felt that okay, maybe this is an opportunity with the proliferation of these micromobilities to take a look at this, open up the document again, and see how we can move forward working with the agencies and the vendors, and see how we can find or define policies or standardize things across different cities. Different cities, different jurisdictions always have different, policies, ordinances. So if we work on a countywide basis, we can maybe get some continuity across jurisdictions. And lastly, I'm really excited about this one, even though we don't have the money yet. But this is a countywide emergency evacuation planning. I feel pretty optimistically confident that we're going to get this funding, but this is really to address natural disasters. For example, the La Miranda area with the fires, the coast side and then other areas like East County with the fires, and also the West County with the sea level rise and so forth. So there's a lot of work that's already been done countywide. I know with the emergency first responders and so forth. So this plan we will actually be working with other agencies outside of our typical transportation agency, work with first responders, fire departments, and so forth to complement what they are doing right now. So it's important to work with those folks to address some of these emergency evacuation. And the other part of this is to leverage all the ITS infrastructure that we're going to be putting out there as part of the Smart Signals project. That one, I think we should be hearing about the award announcement shortly, but I don't think that project is going to start until really the second half of the year if we're successful. With that, I will take any questions. Thank you.
Sorry, that was a lot more than I expected, but okay, good. The only other thing I would add, just on the final evacuation process, I would assume we would have conversations with Contra Costa Consolidated, because we just did, on the board level, authorized, I think, something upwards of $850,000 for new software that would help them determine evacuation zones, a much more time responsive and more up to date emergency evacuations and those types of things. So it might be something that, if we get the funding soon enough, that we're in conjunction with them.
Certainly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. That was great. So any other comments here from commissioners? I don't see anybody in the public. Jackie, is there anybody online that wants to comment?
No comments.
Okay, so bringing it back to the commission, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
That is to approve the proposed planning department work plan. Okay, so motion by Haskew. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Meadows. Jackie, can we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Meadows?
Aye.
Commissioner Perkins? Vice Chair Haskew?
Aye.
Chair Kelly?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Perkins absent.
Okay, so our next regular item is item 4B, Measure J audit of the City of Richmond's paratransit financials and service delivery, presented by Rashida Kamara. Welcome, Rashida.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Rashida Kamara, and I'm the Program Manager for Accessibility and Equity. And today I'm going to be be presenting the Measure J audit for the City of Richmond program with a recommendation to move it forward to the board. So the Measure J claims is a sales tax in which recipients of the Measure J Claims Fund have to submit claims each year. In the January 22nd, 2004 Paratransit Coordinating Council, the members actually approved a recommendation for the authority to approve a scope of work in which the City of Richmond's claims would be audited before approving allocation of funds. In the February 21-24 meeting, the Authority Board approved the audit using Measure J Claims Fund. The purpose of this audit is because the past 5 years, the City of Richmond has submitted claims in which the claims forms have either been incomplete or they have not been able to account for the way funding sources are allocated and also services not being delivered in a timely manner. As a result of this, the board approved the use of AMG to process the audit. With me, I have Laurie Talbert, and she's going to go over the actual claims audit, the actual City of Richmond audit, plus the recommendations. And I'm going to use this opportunity to introduce Laurie as she will continue with the presentation. Laurie?
Thank you, Rashida. I appreciate the intro. As Rashida said, we are talking about the Measure J audit of the City of Richmond. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give a quick background and overview. Go ahead next. So as Rashida mentioned, in the January 2024 PCC meeting, the group approved the funding for the proceed with the audit, and then in February, the board authority did the same. And so AMG was selected to conduct that audit. I was the lead of the audit team for AMG. We also had other members from AMG who specialized in outreach and in the financial aspects for the audit. Myself, I have about 30 years in transit experience working for a suburban Washington state transit agency, roughly the size of County Connection and Tri-Delta put together, and was responsible for citizens advisory committees, for outreach, for fare systems, in the selection of paratransit vendors that we used to deliver our paratransit services, and then eventually in what was a relatively long transition from contracted services to an in-house service. As part of our team as well, we had Christian Kent, who's a well-known and respected paratransit expert. He's actually based on the East Coast, but has worked in the past in Contra Costa County. So as Rashida said, the audit commenced then in early March 2024. So it was scheduled for 90 days. We expected to have the draft report for the PCC in May, and we were able to keep that schedule. So the audit included 5 general areas of review and for a period of 5 fiscal years. So going back all the way to, I think it's fiscal year 1920 claims forms. So the 5 areas of review were their claim submittal and compliance with Measure J funding, budget, key performance indicators, program design and delivery, and then their marketing, outreach, and feedback. So to the tasks that we did within the audit, we started first with a kickoff, and that was done in early March. At that stage, we met the members of the city that would be involved in the audit, introduced the audit team, introduced the members of CCTA staff that would be involved. We agreed at that point to a March 15th document deadline and provided a Dropbox to the city to upload the requested documentation for the audit. Then from mid-March to early April, we did our review of that documentation and then made some requests for follow-up information. At the end of March, we conducted an audit, marketing audit of different senior centers, medical facilities, community offices in the Richmond area. We wanted to get a sense of what information they had, what assistance they could provide if they got an inquiry about the services that were available, what promotional materials the city might have available at those locations. We did a working group call with the city. We did that in early April. So that was a Q&A with city staff. It essentially followed the format of the 23-24 claims form that triggered the audit. So we went through each of the questions in the claim form, each of the key performance data that they were submitting in the claims form, and ask follow-up questions to get a better sense and understanding of what they were entering in those forms, what they thought they should be entering in those forms. And then mid-April, we did a site visit. So we observed their administrative and dispatch functions and then did a ride along with clients as they were doing scheduled trips. Then after the site visit was over, then we started the preparation of the draft report. All right, so to the report. So the general report contents, there's a background and overview that includes an overview of Measure J and the claims process, what claims have been submitted by the city over the last 5 fiscal years, what the results of that claim submission was. We did an overview of their services in relationship to other West County services, looked at what other services were provided, and then an overview of what we've been doing through the course of the audit. There is in section 4 the data that we requested and what we received from the city. We created kind of a current state of affairs for the Our Transit program. This is something we hadn't originally planned to include in the report, but through this process it became apparent that it was an important piece of information that would give us some information about what they're doing today. That overview included their vehicles, services they're contracting out, their current staffing, clients and trips, what systems they're using, and whatever needs they were citing to continue operating the service. Then we shared some key audit takeaways, areas of audit review. So within those 5 overarching areas of review, we found 29 issues and made 29 different recommendations to resolve those issues. And then finally, there's a summary and key recommendation in the report. All right, so as for the current state, of the Our Transit program, again, this is something that as we were doing the audit, I think became important to assess. So based on both the working group call and the site visit, we included information about their current vehicles. They're currently operating 2 older vans. Both of them are having mechanical issues. In fact, the van that we rode in for the initial ride along had to be towed during the course of our site visit. They do have 2 new vehicles that are parked at the city, but have not been placed into service. And according to staff, they can't be because they can't be charged. They're electric vehicles, so that remains to be resolved. They are contracting service to a group called Transmetro, and they are providing trips in instances where they are unable to due to their vehicle or staffing issues. For staffing, they have 1.5 drivers, the equivalent of 1.5 full-time and 2.5 equivalent administrative staff for the paratransit program. And they're operating between 8 and 9 one-way trips a day. So since most passengers actually do round trips, this equates to between 4 and 5 unique passengers on any given day. And they had, at the time of the site visit, rolled out a new software system, and it was about a week into that rollout. The system was not being used fully by staff. Staff indicated they needed more training. They didn't understand the system. They were not taking advantage of the automated features of the system and still manually writing information about passenger pickups and drop-offs and odometer readings because they simply didn't have enough knowledge of it to use it. So the key takeaways highlighted in the draft report then are that there is certainly a value to the city's paratransit services. The clients who use it need it. They appreciate it. The frontline staff have good interactions with those clients, and there's a sense all around with those staff that they're providing an important service. There are lots of errors and contradictions within the city's claims. The city's claims to their own reporting and then within their reporting. So key data within their own reports will contradict the same figure or the same data set within the same year. So lots of contradictions, lots of errors. It did make it difficult to really assess what they're operating, how many passengers they're carrying because of that. There is a lack of understanding of the program metrics by city staff. It's hard to report something out if you don't understand what you're trying to report out. There was a lack of engagement by city management leading the program. We did find that the CCTA claims forms that they're using to submit their information could use some improvement, and CCTA's oversight of these claimants could use improvement. In fact, the PCC at their last meeting did approve a set of revisions to the claims form that were recommended as part of the audit. There is a lack of program promotion. There's a lack of soliciting customer feedback, and their administrative costs are very much out of alignment with the ridership that they're carrying, service that they're offering, and those costs are limiting their growth potential for the program. So again, there were 29 issues within the report that we made recommendations for. I think it's good to note that for each of these issues, we looked at them in sort of a silo as an individual issue and then made a recommendation for that issue alone. So it seems in places that there may be contradictions within the report. For example, we noted that they are not doing any promotion of their program, and the recommendation would be that you, in fact, promote the services that you're offering. But also in other places, then we cite that with just 1.5 drivers and 2 less than reliable vans, that they simply can't bring new passengers on board because they don't have the capacity. So while those might seem in contradiction in the final summary and in those key issues, we kind of rounded everything out and made a summary recommendation. And speaking of the summary recommendation, so the final summary is that there is a senior paratransit operation needed to serve residents of West County. They are filling a gap that if they were not operating service, people would who needed service would not be able to access it. However, the issues identified in the audit touch every aspect of the city's operation and for all 5 years of review. The city is suffering from low ridership, high costs, and mismanagement. They have taken some measures to make improvements to the service. They did add a Lyft or TNC ride service in 2018. As they noted, they did purchase 2 new vehicles, and they do have that new software. But the issues that were identified are going to limit the success that those measures are going to have on making any overall improvements to their program. So we've assessed that a complete shift in the program delivery is warranted. So the final recommendation is for one of 2 things to happen. The first would be that the city assign a new full-time program administrator to prioritize improvements to the program and to follow through on the recommended corrections. And under that scenario, then CCTA would develop a corrective action plan for the city and schedule regular reviews of the program and the changes being made. And then the city would also then be asked to assess the cost and potential benefit of transitioning their paratransit service to a contracted vendor in full instead of operating drivers and staff on their own. The other scenario then is that the city should turn the program over to a separate agency, a new entity that really has an understanding of paratransit service metrics, of simple service standards, and an understanding of what the needs of the West County residents are. All right, so for next steps, I'm going to let Rashida take over again.
Thank you, Lori. So the authority staff continues to work collaboratively with the city in its evaluation, including these 2 recommended options to select a solution. In order to shift to one of these recommendations, there's a phase 2 to this process. That phase 2 is to determine how the recommendations, which one of the recommendations could be rolled out. And to determine the recommendation or the best recommendation, we have to see which recommendation is going to be most cost-effective, timely, and also delivers the best service to the existing and potential clients. Whatever recommendation we make, we have to make sure that we do not degrade current service, because our goal is to keep current service, but also to improve current service. So in order for us to get into these next steps, we have to make sure that it is cost efficient, it is timely, and that it does not degrade current service. So staff seeks the authority's board or your recommendation to the authority to approve the draft report plus the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Rashida, and thank you, Lori, for your in-depth presentation. Are there questions or comments here? Yes, Ken?
So we have 2 EVs, but no charging for them?
Apparently.
Sorry.
Yes.
I have stories
Yes.
to tell. Yeah.
Yes, we were only able to ask the frontline staff about the vehicles, and it was their understanding that the vehicles had not been put into service because they could not be charged. They also had concerns about seniors loading onto those vehicles, that the steps were too high and that there were no handrails, so that they were not ideal for loading seniors, and that they would have to do some retrofitting or add some additional mobility aids to be able to use them for senior clientele as well.
And in my personal review of the vehicles, because before the audit started, I actually went to the city of Richmond myself for a pre-audit visit and assessment of their site, and I had an opportunity to see the vehicles. And one of my first concerns regarding those EV vehicles, I didn't see the regular vehicles, but the EV vehicles, were the steps and the accessibility of it. Do they have wheelchair securements? Yes, but in our line of work, and as I've, reviewed and audited vehicles in the past, those were definitely the concerns that came up. So if staff themselves recognized it, they would definitely have to, besides charging them, they'd have to make certain modifications in order for people to actually be loaded onto those vehicles.
Who actually owns them? The city?
The city owns them.
Wow, okay. And nowhere in their infrastructure of their city, they have access to EV charging. Like their I don't know where they're storing the vehicles, whether they're at City Hall or at their courtyard or whatever that might be, but.
At the time that I visited, they were storing the vehicles at city, so literally a few feet from the office itself. That question is a little bit broad. I don't know. At the time that the audit was done, staff mentioned that they had no place to actually charge the vehicles. They probably do have some charging stations in the city of Richmond, but it was not available to put these vehicles into service right away.
Right. I would imagine they would want that, whether it's their corporation yard or at their city hall where it's thoughtful and convenient. Is there a way we support them in growing their EV infrastructure? I mean, I think there's a lot more to it than that. It's just kind of sad that we're here where we could have been so much farther along. And I appreciate all the work that you have done. I know there's been some hand-holding and really supportive work here. But we do need to come up with the most cost-effective, thoughtful way to continue to provide the services and actually grow the services, because I think there's an opportunity there. And I think there's other providers out there that can do it much more efficiently, much better. And I'm cautious about saying that because I really do appreciate what our employees do in government service, but there's got to be a better way.
To the city's credit, when this process started, they have been engaged. LaShonda White, who has definitely been engaged. We've had several meetings in which she's asked what I thought were very relevant questions that probably should have been asked many, many years ago. So she's definitely been engaged. She's got her finance team. They've been engaged. But as Lori mentioned, there were interviews. There were questions. They have attempted to, when you read the report, you realize that there were a couple of years in which claims were not submitted. So it's not just the fact that this one triggered an audit, but they do have some years in which claims were not submitted at all. And for the few years, I've been part of the PCC myself as a subcommittee reviewer of the claims. In fact, interestingly enough, I was one of the subcommittee reviewers for this claim before I transitioned here. So I feel as if I'm carrying the baby through the process, so to speak. And so those were definitely questions that came up at that time. And that's why it's really important that when the PCC reviews such claims, even though we have a broad spectrum of stakeholders with the PCC, it's very important that people that have operational insight volunteer for these types of claims reviews, because they can really look into the checks and balances associated with that when they volunteer for these services. But also for CCTA, as Lori mentioned, one of the things that was noticed was the claims form itself needed some help. Unless you were somebody who were an operational person, there's certain aspects of the claims form that you may not understand right off the bat. And so very quickly when that recommendation came down, we made adjustments to the claims form itself before it went out for this next cycle so that we can incorporate the checks and balances and also use this opportunity to give a better understanding to the line items, to the data sets, so that people can actually look at it, understand what they're saying, and make it easier for them to fill out the forms. Because in no way, shape, or form do we want to hold money. We want the services to go out. We want to collaborate with individuals. But at the same time, these funds belong to the residents of Contra Costa County, and since we are responsible, we are gatekeepers for that, it's our responsibility to make sure that the checks and balances are in place.
I appreciate that very thought. It's really important to me. I just want to, whatever path we end up on, I feel bad that there's two vehicles sitting there that, so what I'm looking for is, are there ways we can support them? Whether that's holding their hand, whether that's supporting them with funding, to, one, make the vehicles useful, two, to get them the infrastructure they need so that they're operational. So those were really important to me, whether or not they're incorporated, if another entity were to take over, but one way or another to make those things useful things, that they're not just going to sit there and die.
I think as we continue to establish the Office of Accessibility and Equity, part of one of the roles that we're going to be playing is that no matter what the structure looks like, we're going to be offering support. This is actually part of the support that we're offering right now, even if it means putting them in the right direction. I don't think the vehicles will go to EV heaven, die and go to EV heaven. No matter which one of the recommendation pans out, we will have to figure out a way, and those are really part of the next steps that Lori and I are working on. We've looked at how much money has been left over, which pot of money we're going to use to actually fund the next steps, but we have to look at the next steps, and it'll include how do we make use of the existing resources or capital resources that are already there. Because what we don't want to do is waste some of the infrastructure that probably currently exists that could either transition over or remain with the city depending on which one of the recommendation pans out.
May I add one more thing to respond to Commissioner Carson's comment about the EV charging station? Based on other information we have, that's not a constraint for the city. They do have EV charging stations, and I understand there are at least two sources of funding. If they need additional charging and retrofit, that will be available for them to use for EV charging.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Ying, thank you for that comment. Any other comments from the commissioners? Aaron?
So the vehicles are not accessible at this time because of the steps?
Those vehicles are considered accessible vehicles.
Yes.
But there's accessible vehicles and there's accessible vehicles. If
And
you
they're not
want,
the second,
beg your pardon?
and they're not the second one.
They would need in my expert opinion, I would have concerns. They would have to find alternative ways, especially for somebody, the steps are a bit high. I worked with East Bay Paratransit before, and I was part of the review committee when vehicles were ordered, or the determination was made to order vehicles. Usually what they do is that they give you a vehicle model, and part of what you're supposed to do is actually look at the vehicle model and determine whether or not that'll be a possibility. Some of the possibilities are to use the lift, but do you want to use the lift for every person who has that trouble? As an example, a 40-foot bus, some of the accessibilities are to use the hydraulics to actually drop it. So there will be concerns about individuals, and some of the individuals that address those concerns were staff themselves, that they may have difficulty. So they're usable, but there's concern that it may not be able to be used 100% without some kind of modification. So they are accessible.
Do we have any idea what those modifications would cost yet?
No.
Yeah.
Um,
And with this, you're just looking for approval of the report and to then explore the two recommendations?
Correct.
Okay.
Luella?
My question is, do we have the capacity to do a good job in order to get Richmond to a place where good choices can be made?
So that's part of the next step. When we review the two recommendations, one of the recommendations is if Richmond has the capacity by making those changes that were recommended, whether they'll be able to pull it off. And so we're going to definitely review that. But no matter what happens, it's our job to make sure that the most qualified entity, whether it's Richmond, whether it's an outside entity, is capable of doing this job.
But that isn't, I didn't ask the exactly right question, which is the time that CCTA has to put in this analysis, is that going to limit us in other places?
That's a good question. This is when either Tim or Ying jumps in.
Is your project list so long?
No, I think, I think that's why, one, there's a lot going on in this space, right? In terms of the Office of Accessibility and Equity, and Rashida, is dedicated full-time, to doing that. And I think that, with obviously consultant support, as well as kind of prioritizing work, I think we do have the bandwidth, to do this. I think, now we don't have the bandwidth to take it completely on, right? That we don't have the bandwidth to do that. And we're not even prepared to do that because we have to get this Office of Accessibility and Equity kind of up and running. But I think.
I know that
Yeah,
because it's my committee.
Yeah, it's your committee, yeah. And so I think, but I do think we have the bandwidth. Obviously, that's why Lori's here, helping and providing support to Rashida. And if we need to provide more support to Rashida, we can do that in terms of bandwidth and resources. But I think this is a priority for us. It's a priority for West County. I think it's actually a great example of how CCTA can kind of take this next step in this role, of the Office of Accessibility and Equity. Like this is a perfect example of why we're doing the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan and all the work that all of you are putting into this, as well as the work that Ying has been putting into this, and then as well as, the authority board hiring Rashida to do this work. That's the purpose of that, and so we do need to prioritize this, and I think we can do that through making sure we've got, the proper resources through Rashida and a number of consultants, as we always have. That's how we do our work at CCTA. We manage the peaks and valleys, with consultants. Now more consultants means more work for staff, but I think that's something that we can try to manage between Ying and Rashida and even my time. So.
And the money too?
Yeah, and the money too. Yeah. I think, there's reserves, in Program 15, which was intended to fund staff and consultants, so I think that's, and I think there's also a little bit of cost share with City of Richmond in some of this as well. So I think that's also, a part of this as well.
Thank you. And Rashida and Lori, thank you both. At WCTAC, we've been discussing this off and on for years, and we just haven't had the expertise or the ability to do anything about it. It's been a known issue, so I'm really glad that CCTA and Rashida, you're stepping in, and Lori, the audit report is great. Something has to be done, and I will note that there's the VIA software that they have, and I believe Tri-Delta Transit uses the VIA software for some of their microtransit. Also, VIA itself does provide paratransit. The organization does provide paratransit services, so one could look into that. But Lori, on your report, there's one thing that really stood out to me, and on page 18, the issue about the cost pool. It seems like at the City of Richmond that a lot of this money was going and being allocated to other areas in the city. And that's a really big concern to me. I frankly don't think that should happen. If it were just the city's general fund, I understand. My city does that, allocates in different departments. But these are funds that are coming in from the outside. And we want the monies to go for the service itself. So that really, I believe, needs to be looked at closely. And I look forward to, having a good recommendation about what to do. Any other comments from commissioners? I don't see anybody in the audience. Jackie, do we have any remote comments at all?
No remote comments.
Okay, so I'll bring it back here to the commission, to the committee. And do we have approval of the draft report and recommendation from the Measure J audit?
I would move approval.
Okay, motion by Carlson,
Second?
seconded by Meadows. Jackie, can we have the roll, please?
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Meadows?
Aye.
Commissioner Perkins? Vice Chair Haskew?
Aye.
Chair Kelly?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Perkins absent.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. Okay, so we're moving on. Those are just the two items. We don't have any correspondence. For chair comments, I just have one comment. This morning I watched the APC meeting, and Brian Kelleher did a great job in presenting the budget, and I would encourage all the commissioners to watch that because it's very detailed before it comes to the board, so that was great. Any comments here from the commissioners? No? So Tim or John, do you have any comments?
I just have one comment because it's going to come up at the authority board meeting, and I want to make sure this group is aware. And it has to do with our reserve policy. And so I want to make sure everyone kind of clearly understands our reserve policy. And we talked a bit about it at APC, but I want to talk about it again here before we walk into the board. So basically about 2 years ago, the authority board approved our reserve policy, and the reserve policy is really set up to really address kind of the downward and fluctuations, in the economy as we kind of go from now until 2034 in the future, over the next like 10 years. And so, and that was really important because the way that we have addressed, those downwards in economy was we would cap the projects, So for example, in 2018, when we did the strategic plan, when we did the projections all the way out to 2034, our revenues were at 2.7 billion, and they had to be reduced to 2.6 billion based on a downward in the economy. So we had to cut $100 million out of the strategic plan. And historically, over the past 10, 15 years, we've been able to do that and absorb that in projects. And so for example, like Innovate 680 originally had like 40 million in that category, and it got reduced down to 19 million, which was a huge hit, to the program. And so, and we don't have a crystal ball that tells us when the economy is going to fluctuate, and we still have 10 more years to go into the measure. And so now that we've basically have built 95, 96% of the projects, we don't have the bandwidth on the project side to really to deal with those fluctuations in the economy. So that's really what led us to this reserve policy. And so in the reserve policy, it really is set up to where you take the projected sales tax revenue for that year, which is, and then you take the split, which in this past year was about $14 million, and that $14 million was then put into the reserve, and it stays in each of the categories by the expenditure plan. So for example, 14 million, if 3% or 5% goes to program 15, then 5% of 14 million goes into program 15, and it stays in program 15, and so those dollars will stay in those categories in reserves until the following things can happen. So the eligible uses are completely at the discretion of the authority board in terms of how we use the reserve. So eligible uses could be, dealing with fluctuations in the economy, dealing with priorities, dealing with, overhead, staff, administration, et cetera. Also dealing with emergency activities, also paying for a future measure, because Brian, the CFO, and I have been talking a lot about, we're going to eventually have to go out for a measure. And that's going to probably cost about $4 to $5 million to go out for a measure. And we envision that $4 or $5 million most likely will come out of our reserves. And again, that's up to the discretion of the authority board. And so, but again, that $4 to $5 million would be spread across all those categories. So all the categories would kind of take a hit. So, and so between now and 2034, there's a couple of things that could happen. You know, you can have emergency activity such as a downward in the economy. We have to pay for a future measure, but all likelihood, we're anticipating that those reserves will be in there till 2034. And then at the end of 2034, if there's reserves available, we would essentially have a pretty significant disbursement of funds of those reserves at the end of the measure, you know, relative to those various programs. And and I think it's really important to kind of understand that, because as we look at some of the programs, like for example, today you approved program 14 and 16 allocations. So that's a really good example of that, where that's a very much kind of pay as you go program, right? So we're allocating the funds before we actually receive them, right? And so, whereas like on the growth management program, when we're dispersing to the cities, we kind of do that I'll say 2 years behind type of thing, because we know what we collected, we know what we're dispersing. Whereas some of the programs are very much we're dispersing as we're collecting. So for example, on 14 and 16, because we want to minimize some of that risk, the allocation you approve, the full allocation, typically what will happen is we'll disperse only 90% of it. And then to take another kind of safeguard is then we disperse half of that. So we disperse the first half, and then midway through the year, if everything's tracking, we disperse the second half. And then if actuals hit where they hit the projected, then we disperse that last 10%, you know. Now, historically in the past, what we've done is on all of the programs, including the programs to the cities, we've always done this like true-up payment. Mm-hmm. So like, for example, if the actual sales tax revenue exceeds projections, you know, for example, $10 million, right now our reserve policy says, let's take that 10 million and put it in reserves. Well, prior to the reserve policy, that 10 million was dispersed to the various programs and recipients as a true-up payment, and we're no longer doing that, you know. And so, and there are some concerns, you know, from some of the recipients about that. And so I want to make sure that you clearly understand the reserve policy and kind of how it works. Obviously, the reasons of why we have the reserve policy. I mean, this is really truly being CCTA being fiscally responsible to make sure that those two ends meet, you know, in 2034. It's really important because in Measure C, when we closed out Measure C, we roughly had about $3.5 million in reserves. So we did a really good job. You know, if you think about it, you know, that was roughly about a $1.7 billion program, and we came to $3.5 million. So we managed that pretty well, you know, in terms of making those ends meet. And so we have a pretty good, you know, track record of doing that. And so I think we're just trying to do the same thing with Measure J as we kind of walk in, you know, over the next 10 years. So I'll pause there, see if anyone has any questions about that, but just I just want to make sure everyone kind of clearly understands the reserve policy, how it works, and how that impacts, you know, some of the recipients and the different various programs.
Thank you, Tim. And I noticed the APC meeting this morning that Brian had a slide just showing the different categories. Maybe if the commissioners, all of them, could just get a copy of that, that would be good so that we understand. Yeah. Okay. Any comments on that? Questions? No. John, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, with that, everyone.